Ladies and gentlemen, so this video is going to be in basically three parts as far as this series on how to fix arrow fletchings. Now, you'll notice these are tighter, and you can see the shape of the actual spine here. And you can see what I've done is I've put this on nice and loose like this. And if I slide it down, you can see that this has already had a positive effect. But one of these is kind of stubborn, the white one. And it's kind of been stubborn all the way through, and I kind of want it to hold a nice shape. Now, these ones are actually a little too much, and they'll settle down as I let it sit. So it's actually pretty close. And if I work this with my fingers and get it close, you'll see they're actually pretty close right now. But I'm not finding they get it perfect. Now, this is better than it was, and it'll shoot this way, but it's not quite perfect. Now, if you take your fingers, guys, and just start to work these, I've been leaving them here for about an hour and a half. I've been checking them, pulled them out a couple of times to see if I could get them to sit straight, and they're being kind of stubborn to get into the exact position that I want. So, enter the next step, where I apply heat. Now, pressure, time, and heat, those are kind of the keys, guys. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to set this up, and I'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we are back, and what we're going to do is we're just going to do really basic here. I'm just going to take a look at the end here and make sure that these are nice and even. And I'm going to take a look inside here and make sure that they're nice and even here as well. Then I'm going to take my lighter and I'm just going to adjust and make sure that they look really perfect to me. And now I'm going to take action and just start putting my lighter to this and working it up and down. And now heat and pressure and time are our allies here, guys. So what we want to do is pull this to the point where it's tight enough that I have a real tight fit here. This is nice. Now, there's a couple reasons I'm actually doing this. And one of the reasons is to make these fletchings work properly. But this is still loose enough where I can pull this off. As you can see, it's not tight here. Okay, I haven't really done this to make it tight here. But I'm not done yet. So now we're going to leave this and you feel the warmth in it. Well, that's not a bad thing because that warmth is applying heat in an even way to these fletchings. And what I want to do is make a nice snug fit wrap. So I'm just going to hit it again. I let some heat into it. I let it kind of do its thing. That's good. I'm going to do it again, nice and even. I want it nice and even all over, and I'm going to watch it to make sure that I'm getting it even. Add heat more in places when you need to. And there you go. That's looking just about perfect. Okay. I'm liking that a lot. So now I'm seeing it's holding these nice and tight. If you need to, now's the time to make a final adjustment, which I'm just doing. And because that white one was really stubborn, I actually have it coiled a little tighter than the other two. And it's pretty warm to the touch. So is the lighter. Got a fan here. I'm just going to let it sit. It's not super hot, but before I do the second one, I want to let it sit. So the goal is to get those to a nice tight conical. Now, these arrows have actually proved really decent, and they're not bad. In fact, they're pretty close to perfect, these ones. And they're close enough to where they're absolutely shootable. And right away out of the box, despite the fact that there was no box and the packaging wasn't really the greatest, it wasn't bad. The fact is these arrows are stiff enough and good enough quality to take that shipping, and they did so just fine. And in fact, all of the other three came out just great. And that came out of the packaging just great. I've not had any trouble with these, and they shoot very well. So I'm actually really happy. But you'll notice that some of them, the conical isn't really what you'd call perfect, okay? And if you were to kind of take them and scrunch them and then let them go, you kind of see that they do take a better shape. And they end up being just about perfect. So I found with three of these, the most I really need to do is take them, put them in my hand and do that. Because they were just about perfect and they weren't really under any serious pressure. But the others were kind of squished together, so they were under pressure from the moment that they were put in use, basically. And as soon as they got put into the box, they were under a fair bit of pressure. So take a look at these two for a second. Now this one has not been done a second time. This one has, and it's so much tighter that I'm going to do that on this one. And it's for the same reason. All I'm looking to do here is get this just kind of right. Just doing this where I can see it. And at this point, it's not so important that you guys can see, to be honest with you. It's more important that I can see. And get this in light where I can see it so that I can make sure this is looking nice and even to my eye. And then while it's still warm, I can really look down the end of it. That looks perfect. Now also, when I'm finished with this, I will leave these overnight. And when I pull them in the morning, I will pull this right off. I guarantee you they'll be fine. In fact, I could probably leave them an hour now that I've applied the heat, and they'll probably be fine. But just to be safe, I'm going to leave them overnight. When I put this off, I'm going to snip it here, put it back on, and you'll find that this is already pre-shaped to holding your conical. It won't be as tight as this either. It'll come out nice. You'll see. But in the meantime, just know that I'm going to snip this off and then reinsert this part and use it as a cap for my arrows and keep this other length because it'll be the backup and has the same spiral pattern built into it at this point. And I can do the same thing. I can just basically put it on right to the tip and then heat shrink it, and it'll help keep these from coming off and getting ripped off when you fire them. Every time you fire an arrow, this fletching is going to rub. Now you see this little tiny lip right here? There is actually a noticeable lip there. Now, I've been known to take a razor blade and go from the outer edge and actually cut down just a little to make this a straighter edge, guys. And one of the reasons I do is because it makes it a little smoother. This is slightly rounded. I actually prefer an absolute straight edge here that comes down very, very finely to this line. I may do that with these. I may not. You can go either way. But if you do it this way, you kind of deal with two birds with one stone without cutting the fletchings, which is something I wanted to cover. I can absolutely do this now without covering any kind of cutting of these fletchings. And they come out perfect. They come out so beautiful. Now, these are the way they come from the factory. So when I show you the other three in the next video, they will be noticeably different because two of them have a tighter conical pattern. No, three of them. And they've been done pretty equally. And so in the end, this is what I can do. Now, these are red and black arrows. And I've got red and black heat shrink. So in either case, they're going to look good. The same true with the black and orange. I have heat shrink tubing that's of the diameter for this stuff. And I could have used it. All I'm using for that, guys, is just cheap heat shrink tubing. In fact, I ordered this stuff from China, and it works just fine. I have blue, yellow, black, red, all good colors, and they actually come out pretty good. They're not as soft as the stuff made in North America. They're a cheaper material, but it's stiffer. Well, for electrical stuff, I actually don't like these. I don't find they shrink as much. And I like my electrical connections to be really tight, so I find these aren't my favorite ones for electrical connections. But because they are tougher, I keep finding them really useful for stuff like holding connectors together. And you can just kind of heat shrink a one over top of a connector when you use a fat one. I love doing stuff like that with these because they work really well and it does a really good job. Even to the point of putting a connector in so that it leaves a sleeve over top. And then when I plug the two connectors in together, say on an RC aircraft or a car or truck especially, or a boat where it might get wet, it seals that connection. And so if a drop of water gets up against it, it won't short anything out. It's really nice. I've used glue gun glue for the same thing, but this is lighter and it's easier to replace and it's easier to apply. And you don't need much of anything, just a lighter instead of a glue gun glue and glue gun sticks. So I kind of like it. And I just wanted to cover this method, guys. Now, I could go ahead and pull one of these off right now just to show you now that it's cooled, that it has made some difference. And I'm not even sure I really want to do that, guys. Really, I don't, because my goal is what I want to do is leave this. Like I said, it's pressure and time. don't shortchange yourself on time. Plus, these are really snug on here to the point where I'm actually going to slip them down this way and then pull them off down this way and then reuse this portion of it. That's the goal. It may not be practical. I may have to use this portion of it, slide back on, and then heat shrink it the rest of the way. That's also viable. So if this one was put on too tight, you can just cut it here and use this piece, slide it on, boop, to in place to down to here to hold these fletchings on, and you'll have a really good cheap setup that works really great, guys. Again, the heat shrink tubing material was dirt cheap. In fact, it came in what's been a really decent soldering kit that I got dirt cheap with a digital soldering iron, and that was also right around 20 bucks. It seems like I can get a lot of decent stuff in China for 20 bucks, guys. And that is why we made our deal with China in the 80s, because they can make good quality products cheap. Just the way the economy is. I mean, look at where their dollar is at. If their dollar was on par with ours, value-wise, they'd be screwed and we'd be screwed. But I wanted to cover this too. These arrows, guys, they balance really, really well. Even with the heat shrink wrap on, they're actually a really nice weight. You could even make these a little heavier, add this weight, and you might think this would be a problem, but I already know it's not. And when I cut them here, and I'm only using this much of it, it's actually going to add a nice bit of weight, because these are actually fairly heavy tips, but it's not nose heavy. They're actually very well balanced, but they are just a touch nose heavy, and that's good. They're not overly nose heavy, though, and that's the real trick. You should be able to find center, and within a roll of a finger, either direction, be able to control it. It should have that fine a precise balance from the center of the arrow, and they do. I've been really happy with them. So this is yet another trick. And again, you know, like just with anything else, getting everything perfect is all about knowing all the little tricks. And doing this equally to all three of these arrows, when these come out tomorrow, they'll be closer matched than these three, even though these three came from the factory, and they're actually quite good. But when you can see, when you look along here, there's little variations in the way this lays over, and that's normal. That's good. There's nothing really bad I'm seeing here, and when you roll them off, they actually fly really nicely. And so I'm really happy with this. Now, one more thing, a lot of people put a little heat shrink wrap on the back. Now, I don't agree with that, and the reason is twofold. One, it's extra weight. When you put weight at the very back of a pivot point, it is more likely it does this more easily. When you put the weight more forward, it less affects the center of gravity, which is good. So I am adding a little weight, but that's okay, because these were a little tail light anyway, and off a heavier bow, this is actually not a bad thing. Also, the weight in the tip isn't bad. It's not too heavy, it's not too light, it's perfect. I really like those tips. So in the end, very happy with these arrows, guys. I really thought a lot of these guys that are talking about how good the arrows were from China were kind of bullshit because they're sponsored. But at this time, I'm not sponsored by anybody, but they're coming out awesome. They're the best arrows I could go and get for this price, period, anywhere. I just can't get better. In fact, in the 90s, when I was doing RC helicopters, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I found that running, you know, even in 2008, 2009, the best helicopter blades I was getting for durability came from here. But the best ones for 3D flight performance were all made in Japan. And so different things from different areas, right? In China, they've been making arrows for a really long time. They know their business when it comes to arrows. They obviously make good ones. I'm really impressed. The Barnett arrows, despite the bashed shape of them, their real fault has been the fact that they're designed for a 30 to 35 pound bow, and I'm firing them from a 45 pound bow, 55, 65. These are actually able to handle that. So I do have lighter bows. I also have shorter arrows that I wanted to make. So I'm going to use these three, and they're no longer going to be my 28-inch arrows. The only thing I will say to you at Barnett about these arrows, guys, please don't change your tips. They're fine. I like the fact that I can flatten them without having to replace them and put heavier ones on. I like that they're light. That's good for a light bow. What I don't like, the only thing I didn't like wasn't the fletchings. It wasn't the nocks. It's the shaft length. When you tell me they're 28-inch arrows, I do not want a 28-inch arrow. I want a 28-inch shaft because I want a 28-inch draw length arrow. That is a different thing, and that is what I get here. So what I will say to you is, please, very much please, and lengthen the shaft of these arrows, guys, without making them more expensive, if it's possible, to 28 inches or like 27 and 3/4. And that'll make it so that you get a really nice, because don't forget, these tips aren't long. These tips are very long. They add on their own another inch to the shaft. But when you're using tips like you guys are, that are these slip-on tips, this takes up half an inch of that shaft, which means that tip was never more than a 1/4 inch onto this shaft length. Your knock is the same thing, where it's sitting halfway in. That's not bad in either case. That's good for strength. And I'm not complaining about the knock quality, because had I fired them from the rated bows, these were fine. And I didn't have any complaints with them doing that. What I will say is the shaft length was always a problem, and is why I'm replacing them, not any other function of them. I like that they're light. For my lighter bows, they are the better arrows of the ones that I have bought. So that is to be said. They are good arrows. I did not have a complaint with them. They came good. They're not just shattering. I got hundreds of shots out of them. Even when I was firing through stronger bows, I got at least 100 shots at each arrow before I wrecked them. So I can't complain. They really were good arrows for the money. But the draw length is a problem, because I am a boyer and I engineer my bows to be a particular length, guys, and to have a particular draw length. And you're kind of screwing me, because I buy a 28-inch arrow, I expect it to have a 28-inch length, draw length. And that is really important. Please make that distinction. All you need to do is either put on a tip that gives you the extra length, and that'd be enough, but it's not, because this sits over it and creates a shelf, which means you don't want to draw past this point. It makes it less accurate. One way to do that is to go to the more expensive inserts. I'm not recommending you do that. It's cheaper for you guys just to cut these a little longer, and it shouldn't cost us any more, and you know it. Please do that, and I will continue buying these at the $30, $27 that they cost, because they're not bad arrows. They're actually good quality. I was happy with the arrows. They came in good packaging that prevented any damage to the fletchings, which meant all the fletchings were identical when I got it. They were factory perfect, which I'd like to see. That is the other thing I will say to China. These were so cheap. Even at the regular price I see for these of $25 or $27, they are so good. I would say charge us the extra $5 and put them in a cheap box. Only because they're so good that they're worth it. And if your fletchings were perfect from the factory, they'd be that much better, and it's that much more worth it. But I will tell you that either case, having these in my quiver does not mean I don't want these anymore. In fact, it's the other way around. It means I'm going to go buy another set of 3, and I'm only going to fire them off my lighter bows. That's it. And I'm going to make them, these ones, shorter to fire off my 22, 24, 25-inch draw length arrows. But again, I do not want a 22-inch arrow here. I designed this for a 22-inch overall length. I'm not getting a 22-inch draw length, because of the fact that I can't draw all the way back and I can't draw all the way forward. These are not flush. That would be another thing to do, but you don't have to do any of that. That costs more money. I don't want you to do it. I want them to be as cheap for you to manufacture as possible, guys. Please, another inch on the arrow, and we'll all be really happy. China, I love you guys. You're doing great. Please, a box. Charge us the extra $5. It's totally worth it. I love all you guys. Thank you so much for making good products that I can go and do archery with. Keith out.